everybody, SchwayZ here, and I'm super excited because in today's video, I'm going to be telling you everything you need to know about one of the most off-road ready trucks on the market. And that, of course, is the Chevy Colorado ZR2. Now, before we get started, I do want to extend a huge thank you to Jerry Seiner Chevrolet for giving me the opportunity to review this wonderful vehicle for you all today. If you guys are in the market for a new Chevy vehicle, or really any vehicle on their lot, I do recommend you reach out to them. I'm going to put their information down in the description below. Let them know that SchwayZ sent you. Now, this particular vehicle is for sale, but unfortunately, it's probably not going to last very long. So if you guys are in the market for a new Chevy Colorado ZR2, I recommend you check out their dealership. I'm going to put the link to this specific vehicle down in the description below if it's still for sale. Okay, so let's talk about the Chevy Colorado ZR2. What is this vehicle exactly? Well, this is essentially the most off-road version of the Chevy Colorado, which is a mid-size pickup truck intended to compete with the likes of a Ford Ranger, Toyota Tacoma, and there's quite a few other competitors on the market. You could throw in the Honda Ridgeline as well, even though that one's a little bit different. But the ZR2 is a particular trim level that is the most off-road version. So think maybe like a Ford Raptor, or think maybe something along the lines of a, Chevy Silverado Trail Boss, or even a ZR2, but this is obviously a little bit of a smaller frame. Now, starting off with the front end styling, the front end looks totally different than any other Chevy Colorado. You do have this cutaway over here to allow for a much better approach angle than a typical Colorado, where you're likely going to end your bumper right here and you're not going to have as good of an approach angle. Another thing to mention is this vehicle does come with skid plates over here on the bottom to protect the engine oil pan, the radiator, and even the transfer case. And another interesting thing here is you do get rock sliders on this vehicle as well. So this is really tuned to be the ultimate rock crawling vehicle, and there's some other specs we're going to talk about in today's video that are going to prove to you that this is a very off-road oriented vehicle. Now, looking at the front end, it does have a different grille as well with its own bespoke Chevrolet logo over here on the front. No other Colorado has it kind of oriented this same way, and I really like this bow tie. It's actually got a hole going through it, and that's just for better ventilation, but it's got a pretty mean looking front end. I really like how that looks. Now, speaking of the front end, let's talk about the width, because as I'm sure you can see, this vehicle is actually wider than a conventional Colorado. You're actually about 3.5 inches wider between the fender flares, because the front and rear axles are a little bit wider than your standard Colorado, and it's noticeable. It kind of gives this vehicle like a dune runner look to it, and from the front end, it looks really, really aggressive. I would be excited to see this vehicle in my rear view mirror. Now, the next feature I want to talk about is the suspension. Now, one thing I want to note is this vehicle rides taller than your standard Colorado, actually about 2 inches taller, and you've got about 10 inches or so of ground clearance. So pretty impressive for an off-road vehicle. Now, I do want to talk about one thing in specific, and I'm trying to get it on camera because it's kind of hard to catch, but this vehicle does come with the Multimatic DSSV dampers that if you guys ever saw my review of the GMC Sierra AT4X, you'll know that I am head over heels for these dampers and shocks. I mean, they are absolutely incredible. Honestly, these are shocks you kind of have to experience for yourself. When I drove the GMC Sierra AT4X, that thing was probably the softest pickup truck I've ever driven, and I'm going to drive this vehicle today and show you what that feels like as well. But what's also amazing is when you take these off-road, they make you feel so comfortable that you don't even know you're driving off-road. So kudos to Multimatic for partnering up with Chevy to create this DSSV variable rate spool valve dampers that create an amazing ride quality and experience when you're driving inside the Colorado or the Sierra or Silverado, depending on which trim you get. What's even more amazing about these dampers and how soft these trucks ride is the fact that there's actually leaf springs in the back of these vehicles. So unlike the Raptor, which comes with coil springs, these still use a leaf spring setup, but it still rides so amazingly soft on the road. It just goes to show that you don't actually need coil springs to have a softer riding suspension, but these Multimatics work fantastic. They will vary the amount of dampening depending on what position the tire is inside of the shocks. So if you're going for a big jump, it will actually tighten up the shocks so you don't bottom out when you hit the ground. So very smart technology there. Now, while we're back here, I also want to point out that this truck comes with a fully boxed frame, which is a little bit different than some of the other competitors, but that adds a little bit more to the rigidity of the underbody of this vehicle. Now, coming to the side, I do want to point out what type of configuration you can get, because you can get it in this crew cab short bed configuration, and just so you're aware, that's about a 5'2" bed, Or what's interesting here, which I was kind of surprised about, is the fact that you can actually get this in an extended cab where you actually have a door that will open the opposite way and have a little bit less legroom in the back, but then you can actually get a 6-foot 2-inch bed. So the length will be about the same, but you'll be able to get a longer bed to be able to carry more gear if you're taking this on some crazy camping or off-roading, and you don't really need that much back passenger space. Now, before we go to the rear end, I do want to briefly talk about these tires. These are Wrangler DuraTrack tires, which I have Wrangler Territory MTs on my Bronco, and they work really well off-road. It's wrapped around a 17-inch wheel, and they are just about 31 inches. So they're a little bit smaller than some of the other off-road vehicles that go up to 37s now on like a Ford Raptor R, but still plenty of space. Now, I do have a feeling you might be able to fit like 33s on here is probably the max without rubbing the inner wheel well, but nonetheless, 31 inches is still pretty good for an off-road vehicle. Okay, now coming to the back, I do want to point out you have the ZR2 sticker over here. It looks really nice. And the back of the Colorado looks really good too. You have Chevrolet embossed over here on the tailgate, a ZR2 badge over here down below, and the lights are typical Chevy Colorado. If you've seen one, you kind of seen them all. But coming back here, you do have your trailer hitch. Now, towing capacity on this vehicle, because it has that off-road suspension, is a little bit compromised compared to the regular Colorado. Towing max capacity on this is actually 5,000 pounds, which is still pretty decent, but you would kind of want a little bit more for a pickup truck, but maybe that's all you need to tow is about 5,000 pounds. A nice thing to point out is you do have a spare tire over here underneath the truck bed, so if you do pop one while you're going off-roading, well, you still have the ability to replace it, which is nice. And then there's another look of the undercarriage and those Multimatic shocks as well. Now let's show you what the truck bed looks like. This does have a soft open, which is nice. I like that they're adding that in a lot more trucks. Again, it's about a 5-foot bed. Nothing too crazy back here. You don't have any power outlets, which I kind of wish you would have because some of the more modern trucks do, but you do have ZR2 over here on the back. Looks really nice. And then I will say it's a pretty light tailgate. So they do have a dampening system where it's easier to close. So that is nice. That pretty much wraps up the exterior. Now let's jump on the interior. Now, before we talk about anything else, I do want to talk about payload. The max payload for a ZR2 is actually 1,350 pounds, but this one with the additional packages is 1,230 pounds. Now, starting with the door panel, I do have a couple complaints. This is a hard touch plastic all the way around. You guys know that I'm kind of a snob when I want soft touch materials up here. This is hard touch. This is a softer material where you're gonna rest your elbow, but it's still a little bit on the harder side. It's kind of a rubberized material, but you know, it is a truck. You're not gonna expect leather or anything like that, even though we will talk about that in just a second. You do have 2 different pockets over here for storage, which is nice. Your cup holder, and then this particular one that we're looking at does have the premium Bose sound system. So that has 7 speakers. It does sound pretty good overall. I've experienced the Bose systems in other Chevy products and they're pretty decent. The seats, that's a good look at what they look like. You do have ZR2 over here stitched at the top. I really like the shape of the top of the seat. Leather seats are standard if you do get the ZR2, which is nice. You also do get heated front seats, front driver and passenger, and heated steering wheel with the ZR2, and it is a leather wrapped steering wheel. Now, this is kind of the older Chevy steering wheel. I reviewed this in my Chevy Traverse review, so it looks very similar to that, but they are coming out with newer looking steering wheels. This one does not have that because, which I'll talk about in just a second, this is the last model year of this shape and this body style of the ZR2. You do have your vents over here. Over here, you do have your trailer brake controller, which is also standard, and that's nice to have. Now, down here, you do have your lighting controls over here on the left, and on the right hand side is your transfer case controller. So you do have your 2 high, 4 low, and then you do have a 4 auto, which is nice to have. That way you don't have to consistently switch between the two if you're driving in, you know, wet conditions, then dry conditions, on and off. This is what the pedal area looks like, and then let's hop inside and show you what the instrument cluster looks like as well. Seating position in this vehicle is a little bit different than something like a Tacoma. This one, you almost sit more like kind of like a crossover. You don't have that really high stance that you get in some of the Tacomas that you sit in. This is a look at the instrument gauge cluster. I believe this is probably about a 3.5 or 4 inch display. I do wish it was a little bit larger, but again, this is kind of the previous generation of vehicle. And then this is all hard touch plastic as well, but you do kind of have a nice design to it, which makes it look a little bit nice when you're driving down the road and you're kind of staring forward towards the vehicle. I do like that hood scoop that you could see on the hood over there. Really aggressive on the exterior. Interior interior is kind of more of a typical pickup truck or typical Colorado. Over here, you do have, on this particular one, the upgraded 8-inch infotainment screen. Now, all of them come with an 8-inch screen, but this one has like built-in navigation and some other features because this is one of the packages on this vehicle. You do have your home buttons and kind of your seek and track. This is a pretty simple GM system. If you've kind of used one, you've used them all. But I do really like the infotainment screens on these GMs. They've really come a long way in the software, and it shows. It's a very snappy and quick system and pretty simple to use. Over here are your climate controls. They're all physical buttons, which a lot of people still love. And then over here is where you get some of your off-road goodies. Now, this is one of the only vehicles, if not the only mid-size pickup truck that comes with rear and front lockers. A lot of them come with rear lockers, but this one actually has both. And it looks like you can engage them separately, which is nice to have when you're going off-roading. That is pretty cool to have. You do have your traction control off. And then over here are your toggle switches for trailering. This is kind of your trail cruise control. So when you're going downhill, you can set a specific speed and it'll keep it that way. And then this is your lighting for the truck bed. Now, I do like that these are toggle switches. They are a little bit on the cheaper side because they're just kind of plastic material. I do wish they were metal, but again, this isn't a $70,000 truck, which we'll talk about here in just a minute. You do have your heated controls over here. You could do your cushion and your seat back or just your seat back. And then this is just a little compartment here for some change. Going a little bit further down here below, you do have some 2 USB ports and an auxiliary jack. You also have a little SD card slot, so I bet you can play music and items off of your SD card. And then you do have just your 12-volt adapter over there and just a nice storage space over here. Now, you may be wondering, does this vehicle come with wireless charging? It does. It's actually located right here, right in front of the armrest. And it's a little bit on the smaller side. Like, this is my phone over here, and it doesn't really fit. Mine's a Galaxy S22 Ultra, but if you have anything smaller than this, because this is a gigantic phone, you'll probably fit just fine. You do have your leather wrapped shifter, which is nice. 2 cup holders over here as well. And then this is a very soft arm compartment as well. And opening this up, you do have quite a little bit of space over there. It's pretty narrow, but it is pretty deep for a vehicle. Like, I could probably fit all the way down to my elbow, which is a large amount of space for a mid-size pickup truck. It does also sit pretty high, but a nice resting position as you're driving down the road. There's a look at the passenger side. Not too much more to discuss. Now let's talk about the rear. Okay, going into the second row, same type of hard touch plastics. You wouldn't expect anything otherwise. This area is still soft touch. You do have a compartment over here. Again, a little bit more of that dual storage area, and then you do have a cup holder over here as well. Here are your window switches, and then this is a look at the second row. Looks pretty nice with these leather seats, and they do actually lift up. So by pulling on this lever and then pulling this up, you'll be able to expose a little bit more storage space. So it's nice that it's actually covered, so if stuff is put in here, it doesn't roll out into this leg compartment over here. But it is a pretty big amount of space over here for a mid-size pickup truck. It does look really nice. And then just to close it, you kind of pull that thing again, and it's going to fall into place. You do have a center armrest over here with 2 cup holders. So you actually have 4 cup holder spots back here, 2 in this armrest, and then 2 more in the door. And then climbing in, I will note it does seem like this area over here, just this opening, is a little bit on the smaller side. So just be wary of that as you're getting into and out of the vehicle. Now, sitting back here, the legroom isn't too bad. I'm about 5'9", 5'10", and then I adjusted this seat to where I would actually be sitting if I was driving this vehicle. And I will say, I think this is larger than a Toyota Tacoma that I sat in last time. It's a pretty decent amount of space considering this is a mid-size pickup truck. Not much more else to report back here. You do have 2 USB ports, and then you do have a 12-volt power adapter, and then a small storage compartment over here. Unfortunately, no vents here in the second row, but neither does my Ford Bronco. Not much more to report. I do like the leather seats. There is no sunroof on this vehicle, but you do have a manual opening rear window as well. Now, in terms of headroom, there's plenty of space. And what I will say is it looks like the second row is a little bit taller than the first, so I can actually have a pretty nice commanding view of the front of the vehicle as I'm driving down the road. Okay, now let's talk about the engine. What's interesting here, and another competitive advantage of the Colorado, is you can get 2 different engine options. This one in particular is the 3.6 liter V6 engine that produces 308 horsepower and 275 pound-feet of torque. That's a healthy amount of horsepower for a mid-size pickup truck. Now, all of that power is sent to an 8-speed automatic transmission, and obviously this is all-wheel drive, as you saw with the transfer case I showed you earlier. Now, fuel economy for this vehicle is 16 in the city and 18 18 on the highway, which it's okay for a pickup truck. Now, the other cool thing for you diesel fans is you can actually still get a Colorado ZR2 with a mini 2.8 liter Duramax turbo diesel engine, and that engine produces 181 horsepower but a whopping 369 pound-feet of torque. Now, that transmission is a little bit different. It's actually a 6-speed auto, and the fuel economy is a little bit better on that one at 18 in the city and 22 on the highway. But how cool is it that you can get pretty much the only off-road pickup truck on the market with a turbo diesel Duramax? That's pretty amazing. Now, I do briefly want to point out that this vehicle does have a 4-star crash test rating, so in case you're wondering about safety, well, there you have it. One more thing I do want to mention about this vehicle is this is the last year that you can get this body style, the 2022 model year, because as of 2023, they are updating the looks of the interior. Exterior is kind of bringing it up to the modern standards, but there are a few things that kind of take away from the coolness of this vehicle with this new model year, because you can only get the new model year of the 2023 with one configuration. So you can't get the short extended cab with the long bed, and they got rid of the turbo diesel. So if you're wanting a Duramax with kind of a longer bed and a short extended cab setup, well, then the 2022 model year is the last year you can get that setup. Okay, now let's talk about pricing. So the ZR2 starts at $44,800. This particular vehicle that's standing behind me, this one's around $49,000 because it comes with a few extra goodies, but you can get these equipped for over $60,000 if you get like the turbo diesel and all of the additional accessories. So that gets a little bit into the expensive territory, but the fact that you can pick one of these up between like $45,000 to $50,000 is pretty impressive for a very capable off-road pickup truck. Okay, now let's get into the driver's seat and see how the ZR2 drives. First thing I want to point out is something I haven't done in a while, which is pull out a set of car keys. That's because you actually have to have a physical car key to put in, and you know, the remote is very similar to all other Chevy keys. You do have remote start, which is nice, but I do wish they had push button start, as that is a pretty simple feature that's in a lot of different vehicles nowadays. Very odd having to use a physical key to turn a vehicle on, but nonetheless, that's the most I'm gonna talk about that. Let's turn the heated seats on because it is very, very cold outside. Okay, so setting off in the Colorado ZR2. First impressions is this vehicle is pretty easy to maneuver and understand. I mean, as you can tell, it's not a very large pickup truck. It's not like an F-150 or a Silverado. This thing is pretty maneuverable and pretty easy to understand. Now we're just gonna do a little acceleration here. It's not bad. I mean, I'm not gonna mash on the pedal because this is a brand new vehicle. There's a break-in period, etc. But, you know, it's a 3.6 liter V6. There's not really anything surprising or crazy to report. Here driving over these train tracks, the vehicle is soft. It's not as soft though as the GMC Sierra AT4X that I reviewed a few months back. That thing was out of this world soft. Now, this isn't bad by any means. It's still a very soft riding vehicle, but it's not as soft as that one is. I still think the Multimatic DSSV shocks are incredible, and I know off-road they do an amazing job, but this thing is still probably softer than the majority of pickup trucks on the market. It's just not as soft as the GMC Sierra AT4X. Now, even though I had to knock this vehicle on the lack of a push to start, I will say that this software is amazing. Chevy does a very good job, and look just how quick it goes through all of the menus. You know, there's no fancy 360-degree camera here, which would be nice to have, especially if you're off-roading. But I do believe the next generation model that's coming out will have that as an option. Now, talking about the interior, it is a little bit dated. You know, like I mentioned earlier, this is all hard touch plastic. You know, it's pretty simple of an interior, but you know, a lot of people actually really like that. They prefer that to some of the fancy gizmos and gadgets that a lot of modern trucks come with, especially that GMC Sierra I reviewed that had, you know, so much tech inside the vehicle that it's not really a pickup truck at that point. This thing, you sit inside of it, you can tell this is a pickup truck. It's very utilitarian, very practical. It drives like a pickup truck, although a little bit on the softer end. And you know, your seating position and all of the technology is like a pickup truck. So even though there is an updated version of this Colorado and the ZR2 specifically coming out next year or the year after that, you know, that vehicle is going to be a little bit more on the fancier, gadgety end. It's going to be a little bit more luxurious on the inside because you're going to have some more modern materials. but it's probably not going to be as practical as this vehicle right here. You know, if you're looking for a true pickup truck, this is what it is. I mean, it's not meant to have fancy technology, and at the price point that you're looking at, somewhere around $45,000 to $50,000, you know, this is kind of what you get, especially for all of the off-road goodies that this vehicle comes with that a lot of the competitors just don't even offer. I mean, sitting inside of a Ford Ranger, as you can see, there's one driving by, it's a very similar interior. The other thing to point out is the fact that the next generation Colorado is likely going to be about $4,000 to $5,000 more expensive, at least for the ZR2 trim, even though exact pricing hasn't been released at the moment. You know, as I'm looking over on the side view mirrors, I am noticing that there is no blind spot monitoring in this vehicle either, which is something I'm going to knock Chevy on, because that is something that is really nice to have, especially at a vehicle that's around $45,000. You know, blind spot monitoring is kind of a given nowadays, just like a backup camera is as well. And then I will knock them for making a pretty small cell phone spot for a wireless charger, but hey, at least they do offer that on this vehicle. And yeah, acceleration is fine. I mean, it's nothing that's impressive or crazy. There's no turbocharging here. I am curious to hear what the turbo diesel would drive like, because you know, that vehicle is likely going to be a little bit peppier, a little bit more torquier than this one in particular. But this 3.6 liter is just fine to move this amount of weight. I will say you are pretty insulated inside of the cabin. It's not very loud inside of the truck. You don't hear a lot of road noise. You do hear the engine a little bit, but not much in road noise. Overall, I think it's a pretty impressive pickup truck. It looks like a pickup truck. It drives like a truck. There's not really any surprises when you're driving the Colorado. Well, there you have it, folks. I do hope you guys enjoyed today's fun video of the Colorado ZR2. So what are my overall thoughts? Well, if you're looking for like a Ford Bronco or a Jeep Wrangler capable off-roader, but you need more practicality with a truck bed because you want to carry some gear around and you need more towing capacity, I think this is the best vehicle on the market for that. You get a pickup truck with incredible off-road capabilities, probably the most capable mid-size pickup truck, at least until maybe the Ford Ranger Raptor comes out, if it ever actually comes out. The other thing I want to point out is, even though they are coming out with a more updated styling version with the 2023 model year, that one, just like everything else, is going to become more and more expensive. I think Car and Driver actually estimates that one's going to start around $48,000, but you probably won't find one cheaper than $50,000. So this may be the right time to buy an off-road capable vehicle that's probably less than $50,000. Well, if you guys did enjoy today's video, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for all of the weekly car videos. Also, check me out on all the social media down in the description below at SchwayZ_. As always, everybody, I hope you stay SchwayZ, stay healthy, have a wonderful day.